Welcome to the Daily Vibecasting. Today, King Charles delivers a masterclass in geopolitical shade. The AI revolution is quietly jacking up the price of your computer's RAM, and San Francisco is getting a real-world robot fight club.
Yeah, it is quite the timeline today. I mean, there is a lot to unpack.
Right. And if you are listening to this on your phone right now or, playing it through your car speakers, you are actively participating in this massive collision on the data wire. We've got a lot of sources to get through for this deep dive, but there is a very clear through line.
For sure.
We are looking at high-stakes macro politics, intense infrastructural tech bottlenecks, and honestly, just the bizarre, almost dystopian ways our culture is reacting to all of it. So I want to lay out exactly what's happening, but I know you are already looking like 3 steps ahead.
Always. Because look, what's fascinating here is that the narratives you see trending on your timeline, the applause lines, the viral videos, the aesthetic trends, they are almost entirely a facade. They are hiding the real shifts in power and capital. If you want to know who is actually winning, you have to look at the second-order effects, like who loses money, who gets regulated, what behavior is the algorithm actively rewarding, because honestly, that's where the real story is.
Okay, let's start right at the top with the global chessboard. We are looking at the geopolitical vibes, specifically this major state visit between the U.S. and the U.K. To set the table, we're pulling from a post by the handle at Breaking 9/11. Donald Trump formally welcomed King Charles and Queen Camilla,
Right.
and Trump's speech was deeply, deeply focused on the historical roots of the U.S.-UK relationship. He framed it entirely around Britain's cultural and moral heritage. He was talking about everything from the Magna Carta to Anglo-Saxon courage, and he really positioned that heritage as the absolute foundation for America's upcoming 250th anniversary.
It's a very specific, very intentional rhetorical framing.
Yeah.
I mean, he emphasizes continuity,
Yeah.
a shared creed. He is laying down this narrative of an unbreakable historical brotherhood.
But Charles didn't just, accept the compliment and wave. According to clips shared by at Asin and at RPS against Trump, the king executed a really fascinating pivot. First, he brings up the Magna Carta, which Trump had just mentioned.
Right.
But Charles pointedly notes to the room that the U.S. Supreme Court has cited the Magna Carta in over 160 cases since 1789. And he specifically highlights that those cases were about the principle that executive power must be subject to checks and balances.
Wow.
And the room, particularly the Republicans in the room, gave that a standing ovation.
Let's pause and unpack the mechanics of that for the listener, because it's brilliant.
Please do.
The Magna Carta, signed in 1215, is essentially the foundational document that said, for the very first time, the king is not above the law. By praising the U.S. Supreme Court for using it to limit executive power, Charles is taking Trump's praise of British history and turning it into a very subtle...
Surgical, even.
Exactly, surgical. A surgical reminder about the limits of presidential authority.
And he didn't stop there. He then pivots to NATO. He reminds Congress that NATO's Article 5, the principle that an attack on one is an attack on all, was invoked for the very first time to aid the United States after 9/11.
Right.
And he used that specific historical memory to urge that exact same unyielding resolve for Ukraine today.
Look, our job here isn't to take a side on U.S.-UK relations or, the internal political debates over Ukraine aid or even to endorse either of these leaders. We are just reading the board.
Yeah.
And the king is utilizing soft power with absolute precision here.
For sure.
He is using the shared heritage the president just praised to subtly underscore the importance of institutional limits. And then he's using the history of shared grief and alliance from 9/11 to leverage current military commitments in Eastern Europe.
And there was also this moment of pure diplomatic shade that we have to talk about. According to a post from at Unusual Wales, President Trump had previously claimed that if it weren't for the United States, Europeans would be speaking German right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And King Charles responded to this directly during the visit, saying, and I quote, "If it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French."
It's just a brilliant historical jab. He's obviously referencing the French alliance during the American Revolutionary War and the broader colonial-era conflicts. But again, look at the second-order effect here.
Okay, what is it?
It is an assertion of status. The British monarchy does not hold hard legislative or military power anymore, but it wields immense cultural capital. This exchange was a reminder that in the theater of global diplomacy, historical memory is a very real currency.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's bring this down to earth for a minute, because while they're debating centuries of history on the global stage, Local governments are literally panicking about how to keep the lights on next month.
Yeah, the real world.
Exactly. It's the same struggle for resources, just at a very different scale. I want to look at a post from At America, which is a political action committee founded by Elon Musk. They posted a video of New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani. He has only been in office for 4 months, and he is already declaring a historic budget crisis. He's demanding new revenue and a structural reset in the city's relationship with the state.
This gets right to the core of municipal economics. If you look at the thread reactions beneath that video, you see a fierce debate about the actual mechanics of a budget deficit.
Right, because there are two very different stories being told.
Exactly. Mamdani's camp claims this is an inherited shortfall. They argue it's a symptom of chronic underbudgeting by previous administrations and an unfair fiscal balance with the state government. But the opposing view, which the Payos is clearly highlighting, argues that this deficit is driven by a massive, unsustainable expansion in local social spending.
So what does the capital markets perspective say about that?
Well, the cynical view, which is really the capital view, is the theory of the municipal death spiral.
The death spiral.
Right. The argument is that when a city rapidly increases social spending, it inevitably has to raise taxes to pay for it. That tax hike triggers capital flight. Businesses and high net worth residents literally just pack up and leave for lower tax states.
They just take their money and go.
Exactly. And when they leave, the tax base shrinks, which means revenues drop, which means the deficit actually worsens despite the higher taxes.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to push back on that narrative quite a bit. Isn't that death spiral argument just a highly convenient talking point for a billionaire-funded PAC?
I mean,
Because if you look at a city like New York, they are dealing with century-old subway tunnels, massive inherited pension debts, and just generally aging infrastructure. It's not just quote-unquote social spending driving the budget into the red. It's the sheer cost of maintaining physical reality in an incredibly dense area.
Yep.
We can't just blame it all on capital flight when the physical pipes are literally rusting.
look, that is a completely valid counterargument, and it highlights exactly why this debate is so fractured. Whether the deficit is born from crumbling infrastructure or overextended social programs, the end result for the taxpayer is exactly the same. A profound anxiety about resource scarcity, the government is running out of money, and the public feels it.
And that anxiety about resource scarcity at the local level bleeds directly into paranoia at the national level.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if people are stressed about the city budget, watch what happens when you introduce a multi-trillion-dollar asset into the mix. Look at this post from @Tuki from KL. Scientists using geological modeling from USGS just estimated that there are 2.3 million metric tons of undiscovered lithium sitting beneath Appalachia.
That is wild.
Mathematically, that is enough to replace 328 years of U.S. imports.
It is a staggering amount of battery power just sitting in the ground, but we do need to explain what geological modeling actually means here.
Yeah, clarify that.
They didn't dig a massive hole in the ground and suddenly find a mountain of raw lithium. Modeling means they looked at seismic data, rock formations, and historical core samples across a massive area, stretching from the Carolinas all the way up through Maine, and they mathematically predicted the probability of lithium deposits.
Right. But you and I both know the internet doesn't care about the nuance of geological probability.
Not at all.
The conversation immediately mutated. The poster points out that this lithium modeling covers the exact same Appalachian region that was devastated by Hurricane Helene back in 2024.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. People were displaced, homes were destroyed, and now suddenly a massive, highly valuable resource is discovered right beneath where they used to live. So this is brewing a massive conspiracy theory online that the hurricane and the government's botched disaster response were somehow orchestrated to clear the land for corporate lithium mining.
And here's where we have to look at the mechanism of algorithmic radicalization.
Yeah.
How does a dry geological survey turn into a weather control conspiracy overnight?
Right. How does that leap happen?
It happens because the algorithm mathematically rewards exactly this kind of psychological leap.
Walk us through that. How does the algorithm actually reward it?
Well, social media algorithms optimize for engagement, right? And nothing drives engagement quite like the combination of anxiety and the feeling of discovering a hidden truth. People are inherently distrustful of how the government manages resources, especially after a crisis.
Yeah, the trust is already gone.
Exactly. When people feel economically insecure or abandoned after a disaster, they are desperate for an explanation that makes sense of their suffering. So if a post pairs the visceral tragedy of a hurricane with a sudden discovery of a trillion-dollar asset, It gives the user a narrative enemy.
It gives them someone to blame.
Right. And the platform pushes that post to the top of the timeline because anger and suspicion keep people scrolling way longer than boring geological facts. It's engagement farming built directly on civic fracture.
Which perfectly sets up what we are seeing on the tech wire today. We are talking about resources, power, and extraction, but the battleground is shifting entirely to software and hardware.
Let's get into it.
The interface of how we use computers is fundamentally changing. Software is becoming purely conversational. Let's look at 3 posts that illustrate this. First, at warp.dev, just open source their terminal, and it's powered by Oz AI agents that literally handle your coding and testing for you.
Meaning the barrier to entry for building software is basically dropping to zero.
Exactly. And it gets crazier. The handle at Supabase announced they are now an official ChatGPT app. For the listener who might not be a developer, Supabase manages Postgres databases. Think of a Postgres database as the unimaginably massive, complex Excel spreadsheet that runs a company's entire backend. You used to need a highly paid engineer to manage that. Now you can manage it just by typing natural language prompts into ChatGPT. And finally, at Eric Saksky, highlights Adobe integrating Anthropic's Claude. With a single text prompt, Claude can orchestrate over 50 different Adobe tools. Photoshop, Premiere, Illustrator. You don't need to learn the software anymore. You just need to know how to ask for what you want.
What's fascinating here is the illusion of simplicity. On your screen, it looks like magic. It looks like the marginal cost of coding or designing is trending towards zero.
Right.
But in economics, value doesn't just disappear. It shifts. And right now, the value is shifting aggressively away from the software layer and directly into the physical hardware layer.
And that hardware squeeze is exactly what At Wall Street Mav is talking about. They posted this incredibly viral 45-second AI-generated video montage. It takes Tom Cruise's face and his signature running style and perfectly replaces the main characters in iconic movies like Forrest Gump and Run, Lola, Run.
I saw that. It is absolutely flawless.
The lighting matches, the motion blur is perfect. But the caption on the post is the real story. This is why RAM is so expensive.
Let's break down why that is for a second. When you render a flawless AI video, the generative software is just the front end. The back end requires an astonishing amount of GPU processing power and memory.
Because it's rendering every single detail.
Right. Think of a computer's processor like a chef in a kitchen, and RAM, random access memory, as the physical counter space. To generate high-definition video, the AI has to hold millions of individual pixels, lighting calculations, and physics models in its short-term memory, frame by frame. It needs an impossibly large counter space.
Okay, so to make a fake video of Tom Cruise, we are literally eating up the global supply of memory chips.
Yes. In 2026, massive AI data centers are consuming the vast majority of global RAM production. The value isn't being captured by the people typing the prompts. It's captured by the infrastructure holding it up. The AI revolution is quietly starving the consumer hardware market of the exact components you need for your laptop or your phone.
Which brings us to this profound post from @Dwarkaship. He calls it the quadrillion-dollar question. Why are human beings so incredibly sample efficient compared to these large language models?
That's a great question.
Right. An LLM needs to ingest the text of the entire internet, requiring warehouses full of RAM just to learn basic reasoning. Meanwhile, a human toddler learns how the world works from a tiny fraction of that data. I've been thinking about this, and I want to try an analogy on you to explain this bottleneck.
Let's hear it.
Okay. If an AI requires this much brute force memory consuming all the world's RAM just to figure out how Tom Cruise runs, while the human brain learns via incredibly complex multidimensional signals, are AI companies essentially trying to power a major modern city using millions of AA batteries?
That is...
Is our current approach to scaling AI just inherently wasteful because the architecture is fundamentally wrong?
I think that is a brilliant analogy. AI companies are currently just buying more and more AA batteries. They're stockpiling RAM and GPUs to build a bigger pile.
Yeah.
But they haven't invented the nuclear reactor yet. They haven't changed the fundamental architecture.
Right.
If you look at the replies to Dwarkash's post, specifically referencing the podcast with Adam Marblestone, they highlight exactly this problem. LLMs operate on a mechanism called next token prediction.
Explain next token prediction simply for us.
So it means the AI is basically just playing a massive statistical game of autocomplete. It looks at a sequence of words and mathematically guesses what the next most likely word should be. It doesn't actually understand the concept. It just knows the statistical probability of the letters.
But that's not how a toddler learns.
Exactly. Human intelligence is driven by incredibly complex reward functions encoded deep in the brainstem. We learn through curiosity, physical pain, social rejection, novelty, and fear.
Fear is an incredibly efficient teacher. If you touch a hot stove once, you experience pain and fear. You don't need to touch it a billion more times to gather enough data points to learn the lesson. You learn it instantly.
Precisely. The debate in AI research right now is whether we need to stop building bigger piles of AA batteries and instead evolve better, more complex loss and reward functions. Can we simulate those human survival instincts in code? Because the current hardware bottleneck is completely unsustainable.
And because that digital realm is getting so expensive, so abstracted, and so bottlenecked, we are seeing a violent snapback into the physical world. People are craving things they can actually touch.
Yeah, the real world is fighting back.
Look at this post from @6lif. They just announced the first humanoid robot store in the U.S. called the REK Shop, opening in San Francisco's Nob Hill neighborhood. But here's the mechanism that makes it fascinating. During the day, it's a sleek retail and service hub for expensive humanoid models from Unitree and AGBot. But at night, they clear the floor and host actual physical robot fights.
This is the cynical but highly effective reality of public adoption. Think about the psychology here. How do you normalize a potentially terrifying, highly disruptive physical technology like a humanoid robot walking down the street?
Right, because right now people are freaked out by them.
Exactly. If you just put them behind glass in a sterile showroom, people will find them creepy. It's the uncanny valley. So what do? You turn them into a spectacle.
You build a real-world robot fight club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's daytime retail to appease the investors and show the utilitarian value, but it's nighttime blood sport, or, well, oil sport, to drive engagement. You force public adoption through primal entertainment. You make the robots bleed so humans feel comfortable around them.
That collision between the synthetic and the primal leads us perfectly into our culture and society segment, because right now, our algorithms are creating a deeply hypocritical reality for us. On one hand, I'm looking at a post from @Marmaduke091 showing an AI-generated version of Grand Theft Auto 5 set in Turkey.
Oh, I saw this one.
And the replies note that it is about 80% visually accurate. You see the exact style of the street vendors, the architecture, but it is heavily layered with this 20% Western Orientalism.
It's the 80-20 rule of generative AI. The math gives you what it thinks you expect to see. It's synthetic culture. It's safe. It's visually impressive. But it inherently relies on stereotypes to fill in the gaps of its understanding. It provides a smoothed-out, mathematically optimized fantasy.
But contrast that perfectly safe, slightly fake AI world with the brutal reality of the physical world that the exact same algorithms demand from real humans. Look at this terrifying post from @FearedBuck. It's about an IRL in real-life streamer known as Humbleze.
This story is just wild.
This guy is literally walking on foot from Philly to California while live streaming his journey. And while walking along a highway in Indiana, he was hit by a car in a multi-vehicle chain reaction crash. He's currently in the hospital.
The dark irony here is staggering when you look at the mechanics of the platform. Think about what you, the listener, are being served on your feed right now. Our digital ecosystems demand extreme physical risk from real flesh and blood humans to generate engagement.
Because that's what gets the views.
Right. It's the Colosseum effect. You have to literally walk across the country on the shoulder of a highway risking death just to get views. Meanwhile, those exact same platforms are simultaneously feeding us perfectly safe, artificially generated Turkish street scenes. The machine demands raw physical danger and blood from actual humans while offering us a completely synthetic comfort zone.
Speaking of that synthetic comfort zone, let's talk about how we soothe ourselves when the timeline gets too intense. According to @Popbase, December 24, 2025 was Spotify's biggest single day in the history of the entire platform, with 11 billion global streams.
11 billion. That is insane.
And what drove it? It wasn't new music. It was pure, predictable holiday nostalgia. Mariah Carey, Ariana Grande. At the same time, look at how hyper-optimized our visual media has become to soothe our brains. The menswear writer at Dye Workwear posted a clip from a music video by Jenner Edion called Storm. It shows a group of dancers in school uniforms, and the choreography is cut to create these mesmerizing, hypnotic flashes of blue and white.
Why do both of those things work? They operate on the exact same psychological mechanism. In a world full of noise, high-stakes geopolitical shade, and complex AI bottlenecks, the human brain gets overwhelmed.
Right, we just can't process it all.
When we are overwhelmed, we crave the predictable loop. We want the holiday song we've heard 1,000 times because we know exactly how it ends. We want the perfectly synchronized hypnotic dance video because it feels like visual order. It's algorithmic soothing. The platforms know exactly what frequency will lower your heart rate, and they serve it to you on a platter.
But the ultimate algorithmic commodification, like the most dystopian example of how we view the world right now, has to be this final post. NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, from her account at AstroJessica, posted this absolutely breathtaking video of the Milky Way viewed from the window of the International Space Station as it orbited over the Southern Ocean.
It's an incredible video.
You can see the dense galactic core, the glowing green of the southern auroras, Starlink satellites passing by. It is a stunning achievement of human science and perspective.
And how did the internet process that awe-inspiring science?
Well, the top reply, the one with the most engagement, is from a user called @Sonafegor. They completely ignored the science, they ignored the cosmos, the space station, the auroras. Instead, they just used the video as a background to post a generic motivational platitude. They literally wrote, "If nobody helps you do it alone."
I mean, that is just the perfect encapsulation of the timeline today. It proves the mechanism we've been talking about. Online, even the vastness of the universe, the literal Milky Way galaxy, is just a green screen for engagement farming.
Yeah, it's just content.
Nothing has intrinsic value anymore. It only has algorithmic value. The stars exist just so someone can post a hustle culture quote over them to farm likes.
So, after unpacking all of this, from King Charles to the RAM shortage to robot fight clubs, what does this all mean for tomorrow?
Based on the mechanisms we see in today's wire, my prediction is a massive, aggressive pivot by legacy brands into physical reality. Think about it. Because of the insane hardware costs of AI, that RAM squeeze that is making digital rendering so expensive, and the absolute commodification of digital software, the digital realm is getting too crowded and too fake.
People are just tuning it out.
Exactly. People don't trust what they see on the screen anymore. Legacy brands are going to realize they cannot compete with endless, perfectly rendered AI content. So they will start pivoting hard into localized meat space stunts, just like that San Francisco robot fight club. They will have to bleed in the real world, break things in the physical world, to prove they are real and capture actual human attention. You're going to see a renaissance of physical, dangerous marketing.
That is fascinating. And here is a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over, building on that AI debate we had earlier. If human intelligence is truly driven by survival instincts, by pain, and by curiosity rather than just processing massive amounts of data, well, how long until these AI labs realize they can't just keep buying expensive RAM?
Right.
How long until they start trying to build a bigger pile of AA batteries and start trying to mathematically encode fear into their models to make them learn faster? What happens when the AI is actually afraid to give you the wrong answer?
That is a terrifying and, frankly, probably highly lucrative thought.
On that note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay skeptical of the vibe. We'll see you tomorrow.